Women's rights, Me Too, the gender pay gap. We've talked about them all on this show, and the most recent feminism wave has brought an old word back to the surface: patriarchy, a system of society or government where men hold all the power. Is this the time when women finally redress the balance? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Does somebody, one of the genders, always have to be in charge? Men are being told to get out of the way. They've had their time. Sisters are doing it for themselves.
Women around the world are feeling empowered, and they're taking to the streets, demanding change. But somehow, gender inequality still exists. Is patriarchy keeping women at the bottom of the pecking order? The latest wave of feminism has brought an outdated term back into popular culture: patriarchy, an ingrained system that puts and keeps men in charge. Oprah Winfrey used her speech at this year's Golden Globes to call time on the entertainment industry. She described a culture broken by brutally powerful men. In business and politics too, men are still running the show. In 2017, there were only 54 female CEOs in the top 1,000 US companies. And only 23% of the world's politicians are women. It's a system of control that manifests in other, less obvious ways. 2/3 of the world's illiterate population is female. And in some pockets of the world, femicide, gender-based killing, is on the rise.
Queremos vivir tranquilas, basta de acoso, basta de femicidios, basta!
There's a long way to go, but it's been a strong few years for feminism. The Women's March protesting Donald Trump's inauguration at the beginning of 2017 became the largest single-day protest in US history. 4.5 million women on 7 continents marched for equal rights. It set in movement a motion. Powerful men were toppled in Hollywood, and the Me Too movement went worldwide. Women throughout Latin America have been marching against sexual violence.
Queremos o fim do abuso, o fim do machismo, o fim do patriarcado.
Women in Tunisia are demanding equal inheritance rights.
Notre avis, c'est un peu un des derniers bastions du patriarcat, tout simplement.
And a wave of liberalisation throughout the Middle East has seen archaic rape laws scrapped in Lebanon, Tunisia and Jordan.
أعطينا بصيص أمل للنساء إنه بالمطالبة بالحركة بالدفاع ممكن نحقق شيء من مطالبنا.
Patriarchal traditions still hold sway in many places, but equality for women is firmly on the agenda, and today's feminists are fighting for women across the spectrum. Could they be the ones to level out the playing field, once and for all?
With me in the studio, pleased to say, we have Swayne, anti-feminist activist and the author of Why Britain Hates Men, Exposing Feminism. We have Samantha, Rennie, Executive Director of the charity Rosa UK Fund for Women and Girls. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu's with us too, lawyer and women's rights activist. And we have Emma Beals, who's an investigative journalist who's travelled the world and seen inequality, I should say, Emma, in its many shapes and forms. Thank you all for coming in. I'm going to read something from your manifesto, the Minister for Men manifesto. Swayne, it says, you want to rectify the imbalance of fairness and democracy that result in men and boys receiving less empathy and respect than other members of society. That's not the story we hear.
No, it isn't the story we hear because of the blitzkrieg of feminist propaganda telling us that we have a patriarchy, and we've had this since the 1980s and 90s when women got equal opportunities and equal rights, so they had to reinvent feminism. They reverted to the Kate Millett idea of the patriarchy, an ideology of the patriarchy, the good women, bad men script. So we actually see that 4 times more men commit suicide than women. We see homelessness. 9 out of 10 people living in doorways are men. We see men being second-class citizens in health, dying 5 years earlier than women. We've seen boys for 2 decades at every level of education failing. We see men, 140 or so men every single day, divorced men every single day, having their children taken away from them. These are not privileges.
So women have no need to fight for anything?
I'm not saying they don't need to fight for anything. I'm saying we should have an equality of balance in the media. This program is about feminism, as we've seen. We need more programs, an equality of programs to look at male issues, men and boys issues. This is why we don't have a minute.
Okay, we are talking about women's issues here, but of course they affect men as well. And I think one of the concerns is that feminism in some quarters has got a dirty word. The feminism can be about equality, fine, absolutely, but it can also be about emasculation. Shola.
I don't know about that. I think feminism is what it stands for, which is about the promotion and equality of women's rights, women's social, economic, cultural rights, political rights as well. I mean, listening to you, Swayne, talk about, for instance, men not having their children. In this country, for hundreds of years, women they didn't have access to their kids.
That's historic.
No. The point is, it's only in recent history, only recently, that women were recognized as having that they should be entitled to have custody of their own children. So if you look at it from the perspective that what feminism stands for is not about kicking men to the curb. That's not it. It's about having an equal playing field. And we don't have that. So when people talk about, well, women earned the rights or had voting rights or equal rights a few years, please, the reality is that is not the reality. It's not the reality in the workplace. It's not the reality at home. It's not the reality on the high street. So women are still struggling. There are modern day struggles that women, especially women of color, are still pushing against.
Emma, you said to one of our producers that bringing down the patriarchy would bring down everything.
Well, the whole system that we live by is essentially the patriarchy. It's been set up over hundreds and hundreds of years with men in control. So trying to flip the balance takes a long time. And what I was trying to say is you can't just flick a switch and the patriarchy is gone. It's a gradual sort of change to bring about equality. And that would involve equality for men as well, because I think that some men, as you've highlighted with some of those statistics, do suffer with some of the more toxic aspects or pressures that they feel about fulfilling a certain role in society. And so when you have a bit more equality, you have things like parental leave for both parents, which helps women to not be impacted in the workplace unfairly against men. But you also have men who are able to take some paternity leave as well, and sort of creating that equality of opportunity helps both genders if it's done correctly.
But isn't it a question of the scales? You know, the patriarchy, let's say it's here. Let's just say it's here. Yeah, and then it goes the other way. And then it comes back, and then it goes, and eventually, hopefully, one arrives at a happy medium. Is that possible?
Well, the data would show that it hasn't quite swung completely the other way. Although it's fair to say that every single time there's been an advance for women's rights throughout history, men have complained that things have gone too far. From the vote to the right to own property, the right for equal pay, the right for not to be raped in marriage, every single advance that has been won by women getting together, getting informed, getting organised and getting active has led to a backlash of people saying, oh, it's gone too far. Let's not forget in this centenary of some women getting the votes in the UK, that there were 21 bills put before Parliament before that to try and secure equal suffrage, and everyone was defeated. This isn't swinging too far. This is slow.
Is this a war where there is always
steps.
going to be casualties, or can it be more genteel than that?
It's not,
you come
it's
back
not
on
a
that.
war.
Well,
It's not a war.
we're talking about women having the vote 100 years ago. Let's remember that 40% of men didn't have the vote either. 40% of men were actually given the vote then. But with regards to feminism, it is an ideology. It's a man-hating ideology. Every ideology has...
Why is it a man-hating?
I totally disagree with that statement.
Why?
That
Why
statement
hate
is
men?
just, it's so
Can
wrong.
I just give you an example? Yeah, okay. Here we are. This was 20 years ago, and it's got progressively worse. This is an article from Time Out by Julie Burchill. A good part, and definitely the most fun part, of being a feminist is about frightening men.
But don't you think that was tongue-in-cheek?
No, not at all. I could give you more quotes, actually, from academics.
It might be tongue-in-cheek, but when you look at the data, 2 women a week are killed by their current or former
No, that's
partners
absolute nonsense.
in the UK.
That is simply not true.
Okay, that statement is absolute nonsense. That statement you just
by
made
Julie
is
Burchill.
nonsense. No, his response to her. The reality is what she just said is true, and there's nothing about
20 years
feminism
out of
that is
date. It's
man-hating.
not. The British Crime
There is
Survey,
nothing
please
about
look at the British Crime
feminism
Survey.
that is man-hating.
total
The reality
nonsense.
of the fact, Swayne, is this. You are hearing more about women because we are so much more vocal now and in a global way than we ever have been. It is incredibly ignorant for any man to think, oh, feminism is all about me. Men need to get over themselves, okay? Feminism is about women. My father was a feminist.
Is all about
My
me.
husband is a
Feminism
feminist.
is a global
My brothers
industry,
are feminists.
and really,
and they're not scared.
Without,
Neither are they
without
shitless
having
scared.
women as
None of
victims,
that.
One
without
second,
having
one
women as
second.
victims, feminism wouldn't
I'm not a
exist.
victim. Do I look like a victim
Emma,
to you?
you kept very quiet.
I think if you're going to equate feminism with man hating, which it isn't, it's about equality, what about misogyny? You're essentially trying to equate feminism with misogyny, and so we need to talk about misogyny, which is a huge problem. If you're a woman online, let alone what else you do in your life, whether you're perhaps going to be a victim of violence in your own home or walking down the street, whatever. If you're a woman online with opinions, the levels of misogyny that you suffer, you're talking about scaring men. Women are scared to speak in public because the amount of misogynistic vitriol that we suffer for being women with opinions is terrifying, and it does silence you. It makes you think about what you would say in public. It makes you not report the crimes that happen to you. It makes you not go out and write the story that might actually help to advance women's rights, because you know that you will get this sort of misogynistic backlash.
Could we not perhaps understand that misogyny is an individual opinion rather than a societal opinion, and that what you're citing there is perhaps, you know, the vocal minority? Perhaps it's time to ignore that, as much as it's time to stop blaming men for everything bad that happens to women.
I mean, it's easy to say if you don't have to live with it.
Yeah.
The idea
I'm throwing it out there as an idea, not saying it's my opinion.
Misogyny is not individual. It is not subjective. It's objective, and it's a societal issue. Misogyny is real. Misogyny is what women face day in, day out. You can smell it a mile off.
And that's probably the next concept. That's probably the next, you know, after we normalise patriarchy and recognise that it exists, the misogyny is probably the next one due out of the closet, because the evidence shows that it is there. But this idea that it's an us and them...
But do you think society's misogynistic, or is it an individual thing, subjective or objective?
I think it can be institutionalised in the same way.
No, but can be, but is it?
Well, I think it can be, yes, it is. I mean, it is in some cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's there's no such thing as the patriarchy. That's absolute nonsense. It's a feminist devil weapon. But when I was working for Fathers for Justice, which I didn't actually have to be, being a single parent father with 3 children, I didn't know one man who was a misogynist. He disliked his individual women, his ex-wife, who wouldn't allow him to see his children, but there wasn't one man who hated women. But now I've seen, over the 25 years I've been studying and working in gender studies, I've seen so many women really disliking men. And the word for it is misandry. If you look on the dictionary, it won't have the word misandry. If you put it on your email, look up the word misandry, it'll cross it out and put, don't you mean misogyny? Misandry is the hatred.
Let me ask you
men.
a question that I put to the other members of the panel a short while ago, in which I said, is it wrong to blame men for everything bad that happens to women? It seems to me that you're blaming women for everything bad that happens to men.
No, David, absolutely not. Women should be celebrated, as should everybody else, whatever religion, whatever colour. This is a feminist ideology, and it's feminism that needs to be tackled and addressed, and it hasn't been. It's the only 20th century ideology that's never, ever been questioned.
You're at a round table with 3, I would say, highly educated women. Let's use this opportunity as an education point. We are telling you that feminism is not about hatred of men. Okay, I don't hate men. I just told you I was brought up by a feminist. I am married to a feminist. My brothers are feminists. So you need to really pay attention and listen.
No.
Nobody is talking about
Look
feminism.
at the idea of patriarchy.
Nobody is
built
talking about
into
feminism.
the idea of patriarchy
But
is
you also
inherently
have
the
to
hatred of men.
understand,
But let's look
when
at
you
it.
say
Let's look at
don't-
equality.
That may be your
I don't want a shouting
interpretation.
match. I really don't want a shouting match.
Let's
know
look
what
at gender
misogyny
equality,
is,
shall we?
Swayne.
Let's look at feminist idea of gender equality. 1, 2, 3 feminists, 1 male. That
Right,
is
if you want
feminism's
more-
idea of gender equality. Excuse me.
Emma, you've
That's
spent a
not
long
true.
time travelling as a journalist, and it is fair to say that there are very few matriarchal societies. But in the developing world, we're seeing many more patriarchal societies than we are perhaps in the developed world. Fair point?
I guess it depends what you mean by matriarchal societies, because you certainly have societies where there's a patriarchal system in terms of the very upper echelons of power, but on a day-to-day sort of community-led level, you have a very matriarchal society. And while there are perhaps traditional, gender roles that you would see from the outside, it's the woman that runs the show and the woman that runs the community and is the backbone of that area. And actually,
Is that a model that should be followed elsewhere?
Well, there's certainly
is that the model
there's
of-
evidence internationally that shows that equality leads to healthier and more prosperous communities, more democratic societies, better educated communities.
And more commercial value.
And more commercial value. I mean, Ernst & Young estimate that there's $73 trillion missing from the global economy because of gender equality.
That's right.
It's not a zero-sum game. More equality for women does not mean less equality for men. And much as we, the amusing anecdotes that Swayne can present, the data doesn't back that up. The data shows that inequality exists, and yet equality is better for everybody.
Yeah, but his point also is that many student unions have women's gender officers. We've got gender equality issues, but there is no minister for men. The men are lagging behind.
Data also shows that on
And
university
you're only looking
campuses-
after women's issues, aren't you? I mean, I'm not denigrating that, but...
Well, clearly Swayne is looking after men's issues. That's his prerogative. We're looking after women's issues because the data shows that that's where the inequality lies. You referred to universities having women's officers. Universities have had a crisis of sexual harassment in recent years. We know that almost 70% of women have been harassed, women and girls have been harassed in a public place based on objective
It's
data.
National Union of Students, which is a feminist left-wing organisation. Their surveys and research is absolute nonsense. It really is. Every university in Britain has a women's officer and a women's group. Not one university is allowed to have a men's officer or a men's group, even...
But perhaps that is only just sort of redressing the balance just a little bit. That way in favour of women.
Every university has a women's officer and a women's group, but men's officers or groups are not allowed in any university, even though suicide amongst male students is 2.5 times greater than women's.
It's not a male-female
students.
issue, that, though, is it?
David.
It's a pressure issue, a social issue of student life.
David, can I just
No,
say,
it's not. It's
there's
about
something about this
equality.
conversation that I find a tad regressive and not progressive, and that's because the line of discussion seems to be on the point that patriarchy doesn't exist, or that there's not enough representation for men. I don't know where you've been the last, no disrespect, but
Okay, but we have a limited amount of time, and you're saying that we're not concentrating on the main issue, so please concentrate on...
I want us to move on from that point. The point is the reason where we need to be is how can we get to a point where there's an equal playing field for men and women. Men have representation.
There is no such thing as inequality for women. It's an absolute nonsense. The only way that women are going to get equal rights is by relinquishing some.
With opportunities, with every single thing, and that women should have the platform to be able to speak up. And when we do speak up, don't try to shut us down by saying that, well, I'm sorry, you are not the majority women.
You don't want equal rights.
You two have had your voices heard an awful lot. I'm going to bring in these other two. I'm going to bring in these...
You don't want equality.
Please, I want to bring in these other two at this particular moment because we're running out of time. One of the things that you said to our producers that there needs to be active change, more accelerated change. In what respect?
Well, here we are 100 years after the vote, and we still are facing masses inequality. We've just had the equality, the gender pay gap has just become a public requirement, which shows, I mean, from the BBC to banking and finance to, every industry has a pay gap. Some more than others, some that clearly reflect male-dominated industries have a worse pay gap.
But isn't it time to look at change more globally and to count your lucky stars that you live in a country? I know you're trotting out some pretty horrible figures here, but actually compared to women in other countries, the women in the UK, women in the United States, women in New Zealand, which is your home country, they got it reasonably okay.
But this is an argument that's been used against us to keep us quiet for a long time, which is like, well, somebody else has it worse. Well, okay, great. Well, let's tackle both of those issues at the same time. Let's be capable of holding two thoughts in our brain at once. I mean, I know it's difficult, but we are capable of saying, well, hey, in this country, we have these particular issues. Yes, we're far more advanced than somewhere else in these particular issues. And this is what we're concerned about there, and being able to be upfront about what all the issues in the different places are. And honestly, if we can't be safe in the UK, in America, in New Zealand, in these countries that are sort of seen as leaders in some of these areas, if we're not safe, if we're suffering high levels of sexual assault and violence, then who are we to go and tell somebody else how they should be doing it? And I think that is very important.
Do you think it would be a good idea if you got some of what you wanted? To give Swayne some of what he wants, a minister for men?
Well, if he wants a minister for men, he can go and fight for a minister for men. We're busy.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, at every level of politics, there is a feminist, not a women's, a feminist PowerPoint at every level. We have something like 6 or 7 ministers for women to look after women's issues. There is one area where men and boys have any political representation at all throughout all the political situation.
I asked these three women whether they were happy for you to have a minister for men. I didn't want you to go through your manifesto again. What I wanted to know was, they said yes. So how far down the line are you?
Did you say yes?
Yes, go for it. Go for it, Swayne.
So how far down the line are you? We have a woman prime minister in this country. Is she listening to you?
She's actually a feminist herself. She's actually come out and said she's a feminist. Now, how about that? It's absolutely incredible. The first prime minister, the first minister of the state says she's a feminist, and she believes in the patriarchy, which is
for me,
good women, bad men
equality for women.
Well, you've clearly got a lot of ministers who aren't feminists, so
have you looked at her
presumably you can ally with them.
Have you looked at her cabinet?
No, you're missing the point here totally. You're supposed to be an educated woman. Look, male MPs do not think as a political gender group. Therefore, they don't bond as a political gender group.
That's because they've never had to think any other way.
And therefore, they don't act as a political gender group. There hasn't been one piece of male-friendly legislation passed in Parliament in living memory. So don't please tell me that there are more male MPs.
Because society catered for men.
Men in power don't sit there and think, will this be good for women? Am I being equal? Am I looking after minorities in the way that...
Well, perhaps some of them do. Let me bring this down to a very personal level.
Women have had no choice but to take the stand that they have politically.
Are the three of you happy to have been born women?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes?
Of course.
Yes? Yes?
Of course.
So you wouldn't want to be a man?
No.
Would you want to be a woman?
Yes. Next time when I come round, I want to be a female lawyer with a stutter, because I shall make a fortune.
Oh, really? Why? Because of your stutter?
Yeah, because every time you speak to a solicitor, every 5 minutes costs you £100. So I'm going to develop a stutter, a female.
Well, given that you are speaking to a solicitor, there's no basis for that comment at all.
Of course there is.
I thought I might sort of round it off in a sort of slightly friendly way, rather than seeing more darts being thrown. What is happening now? What do you think? Has it gone too far? Feminism is one of the main points we were talking about with this, in terms of what it is perceived to be.
I think that majority of people get what feminism is about.
Back a bit?
Absolutely not. Goodness, when we're still faced with so many modern day struggles. Listen, my point is, majority of people get what feminism is about. We're not talking about the dark side or maybe the minority view that feminism is about, I don't know, burning your bras or about hating men, because that is not what feminism is about. Feminism is about promoting the political, social, cultural, economic rights of women to create an equal level
as we come to the end of the programme by telling me one of the things things that you believe, Rosa, your charity, we haven't talked about it very much, has done that has benefited womankind as a whole?
Okay, well, Rosa is the first and still the only UK-wide fund for women and girls, mobilising resources for women's rights and gender equality, because there has never been a single advance in women's rights without women getting together, getting organised, taking action. And that's what we're seeing now with Me Too and Time's Up, is potentially a sea change where people are reaching out to others in solidarity, in allyship, to bring about a long, long overdue change that is wrecking our country and destroying the future of...
Why is it wrecking our country?
It's because it's holding back half the population. It's still holding back half the population from achieving their true potential. Don't ask me, ask Ernst & Young, $73 trillion missing from the global economy.
There are no rights that men have that women don't have, end of. There isn't one right that men have
other
that
than to
don't
be
have.
not looked down upon by men. And
They don't know,
it
they're
does
not
happen. It does happen in some instances.
No, of course, but the other way about also, David, please don't tell me that men disrespect women. They do not.
Thank you.
You did not just make that statement.
Hey, listen, we're
You did just make that statement that men don't disrespect women.
Yeah.
Okay, in God's name, where in God's name have you been for the last, I don't know,
Well,
forever?
I'll tell you where he's been as we round this off.
Yeah.
He's been on acting sets playing Merlin,
Oh,
which I
clearly.
think is quite appropriate.
Which is not the real world.
Considering we are sitting at a round table. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. I knew there would be no conclusion, but I knew there'd be plenty of lively opinions. Thanks for coming in, and good luck in your reporting from countries where women certainly are persecuted to a great extent. Emma, thank you very much indeed. Samantha, Shola, and Swayne, thank you for coming on to this edition of Roundtable. I'm David Foster. From me and the team, thank you for watching. We hope to have your company next time. Goodbye.